Action.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Tourism Resiliency Network webinar brought to you by British Columbia's Regional Destination Management Organizations. Right off the bat, I just want to acknowledge that I had a little bit of a one of those little messages popping up the screen saying my internet is unstable. So if I happen to get booted off the call, Jason's going to take over for me. So thanks in advance in case that happens, Jason.
Not a problem.
I'd also really like to acknowledge that I personally am gathered on the territory of Snuneymuxw First Nation in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. I know that we've got viewers joining us today from across British Columbia, and I really just encourage you all to give pause and to acknowledge the territory in which you're located. My name is Callum Matthews, and I'm the Director of Destination Development at Tourism Vancouver Island. And aside from just hosting and kicking off today's webinar, I'll be also helping to put some of your questions to our panel of experts. Since the Tourism Resiliency Network was launched in March by BC's Regional Destination Management Organizations as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, well over 1,000 businesses have joined the program. In short, the Resiliency Network is a long-term resiliency program providing BC tourism businesses with meaningful one-on-one expert support to navigate the impact of the pandemic, adapt and work towards long-term resiliency. This really is a one-of-a-kind program, and it wouldn't be possible without the generous support of the Island Coastal Economic Trust, Western Economic Diversification, the province of BC, and many other partners. So thank you. If you'd like to learn more about the program or register as a participant, please visit tourismresiliency.ca, and I'll throw that URL in the chat in just a few minutes here so you can just in case you didn't catch it. Now, today's webinar is focused on the future of the restaurant industry and efforts underway to prepare for a second wave of COVID-19 and a potentially prolonged impact on the food and beverage-based businesses resulting from the pandemic. Our goal today really is to have an interactive discussion, and we encourage you all to submit your questions through the chat or Q&A function on Zoom. We'll have time for questions throughout this presentation, so don't hesitate to get those questions in. I'm really excited to introduce today's panelists who bring really an incredible depth and breadth of experience and knowledge to our conversation. In an effort to keep things moving, I'll keep the introductions fairly short and encourage our panelists to add to their introductions as they see fit during their presentation time. First of all, we have Ian Tostenson, with the President and CEO of the BC Restaurant and Food Services Association. Prior to joining the BC RFA, Ian was the CEO of Cascadia Brands, which owns many brands you'll be familiar with, including Sandhill Vineyards, Granville Island Brewing, and my favorite brewing, Owl Vineyards. Ian's also an appointed director on the Premier's Permanent Small Business Roundtable and took on the challenge as an appointed member of the BC Climate Team to chart out BC's carbon future. Thank you for joining us, Ian. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Chef Edgar Rahal, President of BC's Chef Association and owner of Total Hospitality Solutions. Chef Edgar is a food connoisseur and a true hospitality professional with over 40 years experience in the restaurant industry, food distribution, food manufacturing, food brokering, restaurant design, and build. Chef Edgar has been serving on the board of directors for the BC Chefs Association since 1994 and has owned or partnered on restaurants throughout his life. With Chef Edgar's reputation as a visionary in the culinary field and a well-known mentor for chefs and front-end managers alike, today's conversation is a perfect fit for Edgar. Thank you so much for your time today, Chef. And finally, a big welcome to hospitality consultant and tourism resiliency program expert, Jason McMillan, who will be kicking off today's discussion and leading much of the conversation. Jason has 30 years of hospitality experience, ranging from large hotels to fine dining restaurants, brew pubs, ownership of a boutique hotel, and now hospitality consulting. Jason also has experience in front of house leadership and is a certified chef. Jason, thanks for developing today's webinar and for bringing Edgar and Ian into the conversation. Over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Callum. A special thank you to both Ian and Chef Edgar to take time out the last couple of weeks with some discussions that we've had, and really have an opportunity to discuss what the future may look like in the future. And obviously none of us have crystal balls, or else we would have seen the situation that we're currently in. So really what this is an opportunity for professionals and like-minded people to get together to discuss what we think the future may hold, and perhaps with experience that we've got on the panel to try and give some suggestions as to some of the work that can be done now, looking again into the future for late September, early October. So that's really why we're here. So encourage all the questions. We want to be able to have that opportunity to be able to answer them for you, or at least go away and think of them, and maybe try and relay some information back in different ways. So that's why we're really here. And again, a big thank you to everybody that's attending. So I don't think everybody needs to hear me talking for too long. So why don't we kick this off and get started? I'm going to pass it over to Ian, and let's hear what Ian has to say. I think your mic's off, Ian.
Jason, thanks. Callum, thank you. And Edgar, it's always great to see you. I'll try to give a context here for a couple of minutes where the state of the industry is and some of the issues, and then maybe a little launch us to go forward. But, you know, we've got a $15 billion industry. $14 billion virtually overnight, and it's caused a lot of carnage. There's no question about that. And so we went through the sort of closure. BCRFA then went into a mode. We put together a panel of 60 people, restaurant owners, and wrote the opening plan, which I think is almost a world-class plan to reopen. And no one knew what that looked like because it had never been done before. So the industry needs to be credited with an incredible pivot, if you will, to go from, you know, was pretty successful industry growing, although there was some systemic problems, you know, with labor costs and lease costs and property taxes that were sort of creeping up on us, to absolute closure, to now reopening with restricted capacity and all the things that they have operating right now. We're seeing that maybe that employment is, maybe we've hired back maybe 100,000 people, maybe not that quite that much. But what's happened is that the industry has been so terribly entrepreneurial in such a refreshing way. So we were able to do a couple things that helped. We were able to negotiate the delivery, or the permission to have alcohol deliveries, the takeout and delivery, which I think is going to be part of the future discussion. We were able to expedite patio approvals. So instead of taking 2 years to get a patio approval, we can almost get them in 48 hours. And we're seeing municipalities that are cooperating with opening up spaces and closing roads, and opening up those open spaces that Dr. Henry finds so appealing, which is very appealing. And then the big one was announced last week, which was something that in my lifetime thought would never happen, which was wholesale liquor pricing, which came into effect on Monday. And make sure you register for the portal. But apart from that, and essentially what that does is it'll drive your costs down about 20% for liquor, wine, and beer in your establishment. So this government's been really, really cooperative, the provincial government, in terms of trying to find ways. The federal programs are there. There's the wage subsidy program, which has been extended. CERB has been a bit of a problem. I think anybody on this, realizes that. Surprisingly, we're seeing labor shortages already, and maybe Edgar can talk about this. But in the Okanagan, for example, they're having a hard time getting people to work, and they're having a hard time getting chefs in restaurants. Go figure, right? When everybody else is, they have a beach mentality. It was according to our member and call. We between suburban markets and the two primary markets of Victoria and downtown Vancouver. And what's happening in Vancouver and Victoria is a lack of business people. People are still at home, like probably all of us are on this call. Working from home, the tourism is gone, is evaporated. So big restaurant chains that you're doing about 25 to 30% of last year's volumes downtown Vancouver with not a lot of open sites. So we're trying to address what can we do in Victoria and what Vancouver to draw people in. Hockey's not hanging around in restaurants and going crazy in restaurants necessarily, maybe for a beer and a burger, but to get out. But we're seeing some pretty good success in the suburban markets. So, you know, as you go in and you'll see people sort of at home and going to their local restaurant, their local pub. Some businesses are 80%, some businesses are tracking over last year's sales because of the pent-up demand that we have. So essentially we're running on a whole bunch of different cylinders right now. We're running on some of the cost issues that I talked about, reduction in cost, but really right now it's about patios, takeout and delivery and in-store dining and how we're going to handle that. And then I think the last thing I'll say is, you know, what does all this do now to the future of where we're headed? And, you know, we've changed behavior. You're going to hear in the next day or two, maybe today, some tightening of the protocols that we have to operate under. Essentially, the government's going to really want us to limit contact with anybody that's not in the party of 6 or less at the table, which is a good thing, and we totally support that. And we also support very publicly that if no one wants to play the game and do this right, then get out of the industry, close your restaurant, or do something else, because there's too much at stake for all of us. There's too much, you know, too many employees and too many businesses and too many small businesses in the province that can be affected by very few. So, thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. If you're watching the webinar, please feel free to enter your questions for Ian. We've got a few minutes set aside after each one of our panelists speaks for a Q&A. My first question, just out of curiosity, Ian, and perhaps not directly related to the pandemic, but was fascinated by your involvement in climate action and was curious about kind of the potential impact on, you know, for businesses that are trying to be profitable during an incredibly difficult time, but also be responsible and support climate action. Was just curious kind of your perspective on that, if there's any words to share.
Yeah, you know, Victoria was a good example because they did a number of things that were frankly a bit goofy, but and put a lot of cost on small business. Remember, that was the whole thing about transition to no more plastic and then paper bags and deposit paper bags. And we had problems with drive-throughs. It was going to cost like 30 cents a bag. So all that stuff has gone away. And I think that it gives a business, what we're at now, I think, Callum, is it's still a very important part because it's going to be the future. We have to keep in mind that. I don't think a lot of people, like I noticed at the BC liquor stores, one day you go in and when it's all started, you could get plastic bags. And then they went to paper bags. And then people complained, now they're back to plastic bags because the paper bags were breaking. So it's kind of all over the map right now. And I think everybody's backed away from that. It's going to give us an opportunity to really prioritize what's important from the city of Vancouver, for example, was going down the road of single packages and all that stuff. And I think it's all involved right now to realize that business just hasn't got the capacity to deal with it. But we should, it's a very good question. We should keep it in mind for the future because it's important, very important. It will come back. But I think right now, I think it's businesses are doing what they have to do in terms of, like, we're violating a whole bunch of packaging stuff just because of all the delivery. People are just like putting stuff in packages that probably aren't very environmentally perfect at this stage, but they're getting the job done. So that's temporary, but long-term, we have to keep our eye on it.
Yeah. And then another one for you, Ian. I was recently traveling with my family, taking a bit of a holiday, and one of the restaurants we visited made the choice to use, in their case, it was all biodegradable, but single-use plates and bowls and cutlery. And I was curious as to whether that's kind of a recommended precaution with COVID in mind, or if there's kind of other more creative solutions, because it definitely impacts that glass of burrowing owl if you're not drinking out of a nice glass, or let me tell you, it was a little difficult to cut the steak with a plastic knife.
Where'd you go? What restaurant were you in?
It was up towards Tassis, on the pretty
Yeah.
remote area, the west coast of Vancouver Island. But they said it was a recent change.
Yeah, and so we're seeing, Edgar can probably comment on this better than I. Some restaurants, I actually haven't seen a restaurant that went that way. They, what I have seen is, everyone's doing paper throwaway menus, which is like, cut down some trees to do it, but that's preferred as opposed to having menus you have to clean all the time. But I haven't seen anybody sort of go that route with disposable stuff. I mean, here it's basically people are sort of, plates and dishes and stuff. But you are seeing obviously nothing on the table. It's kind of weird. You go to a restaurant, there's no pepper, salt, anything. So yeah.
Okay, and before we move on, one question just came in from Mo. We are up in the north and have very little COVID. We decided not to use masks, but we are looking at masks being recommended or mandatory in restaurants. Or are we looking at that potentially, Ian?
That's a really confusing one. So again, it's the great divide. We're seeing, well, who knows what's going to happen now. If you look at the Okanagan, so markets outside of Victoria and Vancouver, masks were like, what? Like you go to the Okanagan, there's no COVID here. So in Vancouver, you'll see that a lot of restaurants went for masks, and so it's inconsistent. So we confuse the consumer, because I just had an email today, means physical distancing. There's no reason to have a mask. If you keep watching masks, I we into that number, but probably more because the industry is just going to have to show. Those are great signs of taking care of business. You walk in a restaurant, you see them wearing masks, you get a sense of comfort when you're a consumer. But there's nothing requiring people to do it, and it's causing actually some confusion. I think that we should probably just mandate it, and it sends a good message. And I think it also, how restaurants, Edgar, have always been the influencers in terms of the wine you drink, the food what the chefs prepare, you take it home and do it. And if you look at the States right now and the controversy around masks, maybe if they go to a restaurant and see us wearing masks, they'll be more inclined to sort of wear masks when they go out. So I think it's a good social influencer as well too. I never thought of that, but I think it's probably good practice.
I think so too. I agree.
Awesome, thanks. That's a super thorough answer there, Ian. Appreciate that. All right, moving along, back to you, Jason, I believe.
Fantastic, Ian. Thank you so much. Covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, which is good, and hopefully people got some good out of that for sure. I'm going to pass it over to Chef Edgar. Let's hear what you have to say about kind of the ongoings and perhaps what the future may look like from a back-of-house standpoint.
Okay, I have, thank you very much, first of all, for everybody for having me on the panel, and look forward to saying some of my opinions and some of the observations I have done in the last 5-6 months. We've had our AGM. I was telling earlier to Jason, associates and restaurant owners. And some of the things I wanted to talk about today was menu development, I believe is on there, staffing and COVID. And one thing I wanted to add, one more thing, is how to avoid it when the second wave comes, right? So there's some things that we can learn from. And just in talking to locally. I whatever, your local Costco or superstores, and just because they need it in a hurry and are having a challenge getting from the distributors what they exactly all want from there. So the smaller menu, keep the staff short, and your labor cost goes down too. So the other thing on the staffing, we thought was I just touched briefly on that on the all know in the kitchen, and I know we've all been guilty of that. I've probably been guilty in the years that I came to work sick, because it's my restaurant. I can't leave it. But of course, take precautions. As a matter of fact, we wash our hands all the time, wore gloves, and stayed away from people. So those are things that are common things to do. And the only thing I want to say last but not least is that I'm quite confident what's going on in the restaurant business will come back stronger, especially in the kitchens. And as chefs, and I've known many experienced chefs in my lifetime where I believe that they are resilient, they're fighters, and they work very hard under pressure. I found right? And they pass it on. People feel like because you have a glove, you're not passing your germs or touching somebody and use it this way. Um, I think with this with this COVID-19 right now, people have to pay a lot more attention on washing their hands or keeping distance. Even in the kitchen, you got to keep your social distance, and that's what they're doing. So one of the restaurants I visited on last Thursday was like that. They're in the kitchen, but they stayed apart. They stayed literally like 6 feet, a good 6 feet apart. And there was only 3 people on the line. So it wasn't that difficult because one was in the back, but they're back. So they're 3 feet back and 6 feet apart. So that they stayed that practice out, which I thought was a pretty good idea in the kitchen. So yeah, gloves are not necessary. Wash your hands, much more important.
So one question that I'd have for you, Chef, especially given your experience around design and build for restaurant spaces, looking towards the fall, how do you adapt the kind of inside environment of a business to kind of meet the COVID-19 related precautions, but also offer, a remarkable guest experience? Because a lot of my favorite restaurants, obviously the food is key, service is key, but it's also the atmosphere. So how do you take care of the required precautions without having to sacrifice the atmosphere of the restaurant?
It's a tough question. That will, I really don't have the exact answer for that as far as what to do, but it's basically keep the kitchen flow happening. I'll talk more about the back end of it and the bar area, which I've worked in those 2 areas. But in the kitchen part, just keep the kitchen flow. As we all know, kitchens are small, right? They're only some restaurants. I'll give 25% of their of the restaurant to the kitchen and the other 75 for finance because we all made money, right? You want to turn tables. So maybe I would look at Swiss Chalet kitchen, right? Which is usually 45% to 50% of the restaurant, right? And that's a big kitchen you work. So I would work, I would try and emphasize on having a bigger kitchen, easier flow to walk around instead of bumping in each other's. And we've all worked in kitchens where they're 15 feet long and there's 5 people in there cooking, right? So, but yeah, that's what I would work on. And I would probably go one further step and learn from what we did right now. And it's called lesson learned, and talk to your kitchen staff or any other staff that is operating in the kitchen or the restaurant, ask them what did work and what didn't work and make notes of it. So, because God forbid we get a second case, what are we going to do better? So, and your staff will have all the answers. I'm pretty sure they will. They're working. So,
and I know that we have several businesses registered for the resiliency program, at least here on Vancouver Island, where the restaurant owner or the owner's a young chef. It might be their first restaurant venture. With your wealth of experience, Chef, what would your advice be to a younger, less experienced, but really dedicated chef who's trying to make a go of a new venture during these really challenging times?
Uh, I would. It's funny. I said I just had one with a chef just opened a catering company in December, and that happened. So basically, the bottom line I said to Chef Piyush is said to him, basically start saving money, work very hard, don't give up at all. As a matter of fact, and work on takeout menus, right? So a lot of these people are working on takeout menu, catering menu, curbside pickup. So those are actually working really well for him right now, and he's doing very well. But I think saving money for the next phase is very critical, and diversify your menu on not just sit down, because the patios are going to be gone, right? The patios will be gone. What are we going to do next? So takeout again, and all the good food that people have been using. So I would say just diversify your menu with that, and then try and save money, because money is going to be critical. Because we're not sure if we're going to get a second round of funds from the government either. If it is, it's good, but what happens if we don't?
Yeah. Speaking of takeout, we just got a question in as well. Do you believe that consumers are expecting prices to increase on menu items, considering the rise in cost relating to food, the extra cost of purchasing PPE, and takeout containers? Have any of your members discussed the increase of prices at their establishments as a response to that?
I believe they will expect prices to go up. Most of them are looking to go up, just because the cost of food. Like, as you saw a few weeks ago, the price of beef has gone through the roof, right? I mean, tenderloins are around $50, $60 a kilo now, right? So he's trying to stay away from those and use alternatives, cuts of beef, and same as the poultry, use more. But now we're finding that the thigh meat is expensive. It's almost the same price as breast meat in some areas. So you got to look for alternatives, and yes, do expect prices to go up, because everything else is going up. Transportation is going up. The whole supply chain is going up, so it will go up, yes.
Okay, yeah, and another question from Mo. I have started hearing about COVID tax in restaurants in big centers, as in restaurants are adding a $3 COVID charge to bills. Is this true, and what are your thoughts?
Yes, I had experienced that, and I don't believe it just to happen. If you're going to do it, keep it in your food pricing, and don't put another tax on. There's already a GST, and we all fought that one when it came on too, if I recall. So I would say, thanks to Ian, he had a big fight with that one. But I would say no, I don't agree with it at all. Personally, I don't. But if they're doing it, I would say stop and focus on customer service and a little bit higher volume. You'll make it up.
Did you want to get on that one, Ian?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a couple of restaurants in Victoria tried that and they got outed really fast. Bury it in your food. A little bit here, a little bit there. Restaurants are great at doing that. Consumers don't really even see it. Price of a cup of coffee goes up a little bit and it just gets seeded through. We're going to see some savings on liquor that we talked about. But I think that we talk quite openly and honestly in the media that, yeah, you will be paying higher prices. Not because anybody's trying to gouge, but all this stuff has to be paid back. All the prep that went into restaurants with plexiglass and all the things that have. And you know what? I think the consumer is totally all right with that, because it's a safe environment, and we're actually the only entertainment around now. There's nothing else to do. So I think that people are prepared to pay for that. And the other reason is they just like going out now, and they're enjoying that. So if they pay a little bit of a premium for it, not a problem.
Right on. Jason, over to you for any thoughts or comments around what Edgar had to say, and if not, hop right into your part.
Yeah, for sure. I think most of the things I was going to discuss, Ian and Chef have already taken care of them for sure. So this will turn into a little bit more of a highlight, which is good. And some of the questions that are here are some of my talking points as well. So first that I kind of want to talk about is the overall cost of the restaurants and what that looks like. So this industry in the kind of late 80s to the mid 90s was generating 15 to 20% on the bottom line. So realistically, it was a viable business without question. It was career servers, career chefs, cooks, apprentices, getting paid relatively decent money. And really that career opportunity and that growth. And really ever since then, We've seen a steady decline in our profit line, in our EBITDA, and what we're putting into our back pocket. And it's been a slippery slope ever since. And some people have been saying, and I don't disagree, as a race to the bottom. So a few factors that are going to come in with that. Really, we're looking at an influx of competition. There's more restaurants now than ever before. Increase of wages. So really trying to get a living wage for our industry, which that's a whole other topic of conversation. I'm sure we could spend a couple of hours on that one for sure. And then our cost increases across the board. Most significantly is going to be our food costs, without question. What we need to do, and this is just my opinion, as a community, we need to affect change, and we need to affect change as quick as we can. Some of the conversation that we're not having as of yet is the recession. We are in the midst of a recession, and I think the fall is really going to unfortunately highlight that, due to the fact that lots of places were closed down for 3 or 4 months, and then the lack of tourism within BC as well. So really what I'm suggesting is we need to find collective, creative ways to get back to that increase to the bottom line. Looking to get into the double digits at minimum, and moving forward. So typically a decent food cost for a lot of years is 32, 34%, doing really well. We need to dramatically drop that to 20, 25%. And I know a lot of people are going to be, oh my God, how do we do that? That's a bit too intense. Not sure if our customers can handle that. And I'm not saying just all of a sudden up your prices. Is there to be a price increases without question? But like as Chef Edgar was saying, creative menu solutions. We're decreasing our menus. What is that decrease, and what is on that menu? So we need to be looking at our heavy hitters. What are our menu items? And this goes for the front of house, with our beer, our wine, our spirit sales, across the board, minimizing those menus, taking your top sellers, the items that you're really truly known for, and keep them on the menu, but make sure that they perform, make sure that they're hitting the bottom line the way that they're supposed to. So spending a bit of extra time going through your costing, menu design, again, both front of house and back of house. Chefs talked about back of house extensively for sure. So there's some ways of doing that. When we're talking about menu design and plate design, how many components are we putting out on a menu? So an example is a fine dining restaurant. We're looking at anywhere from, it could be 8 to 12 different components on a dish. Well, we can still charge the same, but let's take maybe three or four components off. So simplifying our menus. And I've always hated, I've been a chef for a lot of years. I've always hated the word simplify your menu, because it's not really what I mean, because simple is actually significantly harder to do than complex dishes. So a complex dish, you have the ability to be able to hide some of the mistakes. But once you simplify, it needs to be bang on without question. So simplifying allows you to cut your labor, allows you to better food cost. Ian's already talked about the wholesale pricing when it comes to our liquor, which is outstanding. I know that it was around for quite a while, and then it hasn't. So to have it back is a huge success for our industry, and really the things that have come through the province that we're now capable of doing, I don't see them leaving whatsoever. So there's a few things right there, just in a quick discussion, where we're able to find different ways to generate more revenue without just increasing our pricing and passing that on to our customers and clients, because it's a tough one, because there is a bit of a ceiling, and I agree, but we need to push the ceiling, because it's about time that we get our dues without question. The second point that I'd like to talk about is the importance of takeout. Both Chef and Ian, again, have beat me to the punch a little bit, and some of the questions as well, which is fantastic. So really what this is the preparation coming to the next wave of COVID. Really, I believe it's a matter of when, not a matter of if. So what does that look like? We get a second round of March 17th, which is quite literally one of the worst days of my life. Being in the business 30 years, unfortunately, I had to lay off 65 staff. And then about 6 weeks later, I ended up losing my job. So I'm currently somewhat unemployed and now a consultant, and being able to offer some of my experience to hopefully help out. So the takeout, the curbside pickup, if you can from your own establishment, do delivery as well. So where I'm kind of going with this is Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats has consumed the majority of our profits, if not more than our actual profits in this industry for the last few years. So developing your takeout program for each establishment, I believe, is key. How you're doing that on social media, how you're getting that message out, what you're putting on that menu, and how you're differentiating yourself from maybe the next door neighbor that has a burger on the menu as well. How is that a little bit different? How are you able to generate that wheel moving and spinning a little bit faster and getting prepped now for the fall? In the fall, we're losing our patios, the extended patios, we're going to lose those as well. And now we're transitioning inside. So again, if we get to another March 17th where we're in full closure, there's some restaurants that have done very well through the pandemic, through their takeout programs. I think we've got the ability to be able to spread some of that wealth if we do get that secondary shutdown. And that keeps your kitchen staff employed. That keeps a couple staff in front of house employed as well. So that way not as many people are maybe being laid off yet again. So there's a couple things to think about. So to be able to do some of that takeout, instead of dropping the 30% straight off the top to Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats, who actually charge an additional $5 at times for delivery, as well as increasing your menu items, the prices on the menu, without your consent. So there's been some stuff going on kind of in the background there that has been really difficult for our industry. Victoria and Vancouver and BC are known for tech. There's a lot of tech big companies that are here. Reach out to some of the tech companies, look them up online, look at getting an app developed specifically for your establishment, and then you can push your menus out in different ways. So $150, $175 a month to be able to do the maintenance on your own app is key, and they're able to get these apps turned around and developed within a week. I recently did that for the restaurant that I was working with just before I was let go. And since then, they've actually reached out to the company and they've developed an app, and the sushi takeout is going bonkers right now, and they're doing very well. So again, instead of dropping 30%, $125 to $175 a month, you've got an app running up on Google and Apple as well. So be creative. Let's look at some different ways as well. So again, looking into the fall and what that looks like, there's been a huge push. The communities and have done an amazing job, the municipalities. I walked downtown Victoria the other day and there's little to no parking, and there wasn't before. It's even harder. You got to park a little further out of town. But what an incredible feel downtown to have all these extended patios, part of government streets shut down. And it's a pretty neat vibe, to be honest. But come middle of September into October, those patios aren't going to exist. They may exist for the long term for next year for sure, but we all know what happens on the island for sure. And in Vancouver, we're going to be losing our patio season due to weather. So what work are we doing within our establishments to make sure that we can increase our cover counts? And that work needs to happen now. So taking care of your costs is going to be super key right now. Make sure that your menu is performing at an incredible value. So you're dropping money to the bottom line. And that goes to what Chef Edgar was saying about save some cash, because we've spent money now on PPE. We've spent money on putting up plexi. We've spent money on creating these extended patios. So money's going out. We need to make sure that money's coming back in and make sure that it's quality money coming back in. So let's start looking at the inside. Now that your patios are built, we're generating, some revenue, and we're moving in a better direction as a community, as a hospitality community. Let's start thinking about what we're doing inside. So whether we need to put more plexi partitions up in between tables to be able to maximize our dining rooms, those are things that are going to be key to do now. And I totally understand the amount of money that's being spent right now just to stay relevant and just to keep the doors open. So be creative with some of the things that you're doing within your establishment. I was at a place last weekend, and they had these giant plexi in between tables, and it was just rough 2x4 surrounding it. Did it work? Absolutely, it did. Was it aesthetic, and did it make me really feel invited into the room? Not necessarily. So be creative with what you're doing in your establishments. We spend a lot of money in our own restaurants to make them look the way we want them to look. Keep that in mind. Be creative. Try and cut some costs, but make that room inviting, welcoming, to be able to get those covers into our establishment. And really, the last point that I want to talk about is going to be about the guest experience. I've been to a couple places now. One of them or two of them has blown me away with their customer service and what they're doing in their establishments. But overall, you know, the greeting at the door is pretty mundane. It's pretty chill, not much of a vibe, as Callum was saying earlier. How do we keep that vibe? I think really from a food and beverage standpoint, the menus have to be top notch. Your food has to be on point. Your beverage programs have to be a little bit different from everybody else. But that service that you're providing for your guest, it's so much more important now than ever to make sure that experience that they're having, that the customer's seeing value in what they're spending. So the prices are going to go up. We need to make sure on the backside of that, that the service has value to it, that people are just really excited. So people start forgetting about the amount of money that they're spending if the experience is outstanding. So really we need to take a bit of a look on that one for sure. The last thing that I want to talk about is it relates to our menu pricing and where we are. Stand on your pricing. Be confident in the product that you're selling, and don't apologize for charging for it. I'm not saying charge over necessarily, but put your line in the sand, hit it, and be confident with your product. Stand behind your product. And if you're not able to, then you need to do some menu adjustment to make sure that you can stand out from the crowd, be a little bit different, and the service is really what's going to win out at the end of the day. So that's some of my topics for today.
Oh, that's great, and thanks for covering lots of ground there. I'm going to do a screen share just really quickly of a restaurant or a cafe out in Tofino that many would be familiar with, Tofishin. Awesome coffee and baked goods, and a really unique, creative example using local carpenters to create a compelling experience that's safe for staff and also safe for guests. So hopefully the screen share there is working and it gives you a bit of an idea of what they did. But
Amazing.
I just thought that was a really creative solution.
Yeah. Yeah, looks like honeycomb.
Exactly. It's
super
great.
creative, and if you're going for a tea, it makes it helps build the theme there as well.
Yeah.
I think that looks fantastic.
So we got a couple questions coming in. Has there been any discussion about making changes to tip policies? We are trying to give more of the tip percentage to our chef and cooks to make it more fair, but always get negative feedback from the servers. I think COVID is a great time to discuss this, as we are having to make big changes to the industry. Making an industry-wide standard in tip sharing would be super helpful. A little bit there to unpack, Jason, and I know that you and I have had conversations around compensation and tip structures previously. Really curious to hear your thoughts specific to the tip structure, and if there's any other comments about how this might be, the COVID pandemic might bring larger, more sustained changes to the food and beverage industry.
Absolutely, great question. Tip sharing has been around for a while now, with a certain percentage of gratuities going back to the back of house, and typically what we've seen in the restaurant for the last few years has been a range anywhere from 4 to 6 to 7% of your total sales that gets tipped out on. So that tip out goes to the bartender, a certain percentage. Part of that percentage goes to the host, to the busser, and then the rest gets pooled into the back of house. So that has been around for a while for sure. So it's a great way to be able to increase the salaries of your kitchen staff as well as your support. So that is something that you can take a look at, and I feel as though that it is for the most part an industry standard at this point in time. And Callum, going back to your kind of question with regards to the future, there's a few places here specifically in Victoria that are really going against the grain right now. in a way that I feel like I can support. I'd have to look at kind of the business plan and really wrap my head around how this is going to work. So one restaurant here in town is actually paying all their staff $20 an hour, right from the dishwasher to the host to the busser to the server and the cooks in the kitchen. What they're doing with the tips after that is a complete pooling of the gratuities. And then it's going to be based out on hours after that. So that's a very progressive way, certainly, to do it. And one of the ideas that I was working on just after COVID hit and planning for reopen was most people are anywhere from 15 to 18% gratuities. Whether it's a great service or whether it's a poor service, it always seemed to be within that percentage that we're typically getting. I was actually looking at eliminating tips, which is a tough conversation. And then there's been some stats coming out of New York where there's restaurants that are actually backpedaling on that one. So I was actually looking at doing a menu increase of 15 to 18%, which would allow me to pay servers and cooks more of a living wage. And then tips would be encouraged still without question, but that's up to the patron themselves. And then from there would be an equal payout, either weekly or bi-weekly tip outs to the rest of the team. So what that allowed us to do and look from a different standpoint is if we get into another situation where March 17th shows up, and if we don't have CERB, we're going on to EI. Well, it's based on what you've actually declared with your income tax. So if we're paying our staff a living wage or maybe a little bit higher, on paper, when you get laid off, you can actually now collect more money than you would have. That also allows you to build your credit. You can now go out and buy a car. You can save and buy a house. So those are the types of things that, from a front of house standpoint, and certainly with newer cooks, have never been an option without question. I can remember saving and working until I could get my first car, working in the kitchen, and it was tough for sure. So there's a couple examples there of some different ideas and some things that some people are working on. And I believe in this industry wholeheartedly. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I believe that as a community, we really need to collectively work together to make this a career option. And when Chef was saying, about the culinary schools not maxing out their capacities with new students, well, that's our fault. From industry professionals, part of that's our fault. We haven't built this as a viable business. We haven't made adjustments within our establishments to be able to pay better. And I think there's some work, and the work should happen now to be able to build that sustainability for the future has got to be crucial. Because if not, come 6 months, come a year, we already know our industry is going to change and it's going to look different. But let's try and bring as many restaurants with us and collectively make it a place that we really want to work in.
That's great. So seeing that we've just got about 8 or so minutes left on our webinar today, if you're listening in, continue to submit your questions and we'll pose them to our panelists. I've got a couple to kind of round things out. Beginning with you, Chef, I'm curious. There's been some mention of challenges around labor shortages and finding adequate staffing. Chef Edgar, what would your advice be to businesses that are trying to retain and attract staff during these challenging times? And maybe as a bit of an add-on, how do you work with your staff team to really have them feel and believe and live by these major changes to the restaurant experience?
From the chef's point of view, and as a restaurant owner previously, I would say I would work very closely with the staff. I always respected the kitchen staff's opinion. Actually, some of my greatest recipes came from people I work with in the kitchen, right? So they teach you, they see you do things, and I think the key thing is respecting your staff, right? People talk about it, but I've been in kitchens where the kitchen staff just does not get the actual respect they desire. And it's very simple. Just respect your staff, listen to them. And when they're talking to you, listen. Don't just say yeah, yeah, and walk away, but listening to them and pay them accordingly too, right? Somebody's is doing a good job. You want to keep them because you know they're gonna go next door and make an extra $2 an hour. Recognize them and give them a bit of a wage increase and give them positive feedback. That's so crucial, especially in the kitchen part, which most cooks want to be recognized for plate presentations and cooking. So.
Oh, that's great. And yeah, I think
What the heck?
a popular man.
I know, in fact, yeah. There you go. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's that,
I had it on silent too. Sorry.
So yeah, reward and recognition and above all else, surrounding yourself with good people is so critical during challenging times like this. Moving along to you, Ian, we've got a question around whether the province would consider extending patios and making those changes permissible for next year, or potentially permanent moving forward. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it depends on. So here's a shift that's really been, I think, to our advantage. And this has been a fascinating conversation. You learn a lot from you fellas. Governments realized that they had their hands in the pot all over the place. So we call it death by a thousand cuts. So when we talk about compensation and careers and the things that Jason addressed, which are terribly important, and Edgar, the problem was business owner was getting property taxes and forced labor rates going up. We just had one that went up during COVID, which was kind of interesting. Leases going up, food prices going up, and so you go, now who am I going to pay my staff? And we kind of leave those things behind, so become very short term. But I think what governments realize now, and why some things have happened the way they've happened, is realizing that getting out of the way, red tape and regulation, which is around really what patio approvals are, if you get rid of that, the private sector does a really good job and a responsible job about putting that in place. The same thing with liquor is, a wholesale price, or we had a big discussion about, this is the very early days. We phoned the government liquor licensing on a weekend and said, you know what, we need to affect liquor delivery for takeout delivery. And it was like, oh no, and they have to have this and have to that. They went on and on. And then suddenly, in about 2 days, the light bulbs went on. They said, you know what, really? Yeah, we get that. And it went to the Premier's office, it came back, and it was approved. And now, so what you're hearing is temporary, well, I'll get to your question in a second here, Callum, but you are hearing temporary, the wholesale pricing is temporary till March 2021. I think you'll see that continue. It's just a conservative mode. They've now extended delivery or alcohol till October 31st. You'll see that extended too, providing that we do the right thing. So we saw some places that became de facto liquor stores going, hey, now we can compete with the private liquor store business. So we shut it down and say, guys, it has to be with food and liquor together. You can't be a liquor store. And you might want to go on some of the sites just see what Earls and Joey have done in terms of sort of creating marketplaces online and talk about innovation in the future. And they're selling all sorts of stuff that you can do, toilet paper and butter and all sorts of interesting things. But in terms of patios, yes, I think what we've shown that there's no reason why next year they have to go into bureaucratic approvals. We do quick approvals again. This is going to take us years to get out of this. I mean, it's not going to be. So what we'll do is we'll start to plant those seeds, Callum, now, that we expect the same service next year as we had this year. Thank you very much. You did an exceptional job. And the best way to work with government is just to praise them and openly tell them they're awesome, which they have been. And I'm convinced that the patio program next year could be even better and even bigger.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ian. And last night on the news here in Victoria, that question was posed to the mayor, and the city of Victoria is going to be looking at actually making them permanent.
Wow.
So not just for next summer or probably maybe the following summer. Mm-hmm. It's really shifted the downtown core, and it really works within Lisa's Help's visions of downtown. So she's 100% on board with this at this point. And it's not just restaurants taking advantage of the extended space outside. Hair salons have been utilizing that when you're getting your hair colored and you got to go sit somewhere and let it dry out. I might be totally wrong.
Color your hair?
Looks like I don't get mine done very often. So, But it was a great shot last night watching, other businesses utilizing this program. So from a Victoria standpoint, City Council is looking at mandating it being permanent, which I think is outstanding.
Well, and what we've demonstrated to the government when we did this, I'm really proud of this as an industry, to be part of this industry. We got a call from the Premier and the Lieutenant Governor saying thank you for your opening plans that we're all executing. We were the first ones out of the gate to do it, and we set the pace for British Columbia. And what that allowed us to do, though, is show how important this industry is to the economy of British Columbia. Like, it is the third or fourth largest industry in British Columbia. Youth employment, employment for women, all those things are at risk right now. That's why we need to maximize our exposure and our partnership with the government right now, because we can't afford to have 100,000 people unemployed, or youth unemployed, or women that can't get part-time jobs, all those things that we bring. And this has highlighted all the great things that before it's like, restaurants, sure, they're making lots of money, drive nice cars, make, all that kind of stuff. Now they realize the real danger here, and I think we'll be well served into the future. That's sort of maybe one of the only benefits of COVID that may come out of this.
So thank you, and to round things out, thank you so much for to everyone who joined us today as a viewer and for posing your questions. Thank you, Chef Edgar, Ian, and Jason for joining us for today's discussion.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much as well for the advocacy work that's going on behind the scenes. I know that all of you are involved in it to a certain extent. That type of advocacy work is brutally challenging and time-consuming, and so often not acknowledged. So thank you for that. I also want to just quickly flag for those businesses joining us from the Vancouver Island and Sunshine Coast region. On July 28th at 9 a.m., we'll be having a food and beverage discussion hosted by our other food and beverage-based experts with Blue Mountain Solutions. It's a community forum which basically pulls together our food and beverage-based experts and also food and beverage-based operators for a collaborative discussion focused on solving current problems and challenges. That's taking place July 28th, 9 a.m. and is welcome for all our food and beverage-based businesses on Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast. And you can reach out to your program advisor to register for that. And a question just came in asking how we can access the recording of the webinar. It will be posted on tourismresiliency.ca under the webinar section. It takes us a couple hours to download this recording and render it and upload it to YouTube. So I think our goal is to get it up there tomorrow morning. Please feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. I think there's lots of really helpful advice here, and hopefully it'll make a difference to your operations. So that said, thank you so much for joining us, Jason, Ian, Chef Edgar. Have a great day, and all the best to each of you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Cheers. All the best. See you.
Thanks. Bye, Edgar. See you, Jason.